Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Speaking Sessions podcast. I've got Brenden here. He is he's a founder rather of Master Talk. He coaches ambitious executives and entrepreneurs to become top 1% communicators in their industry. He has a popular YouTube channel called Master Talk with the goal of providing free access to communication tools for everyone in the world. It's very funny when meeting through a mutual friend on LinkedIn. I had seen some of his content on YouTube, and then this friend posted about the podcast that he was on of his. And I was like, hey, you got to connect me with this guy because Brendan's a speaking coach as well. So really excited about this. I think this will be a lot of value in here. But Brenden, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Philip. And it's two-way. I'm sure there's a lot I can learn from you as well. And yeah, brother, to your point, you got it. So my name's Brenden. I'm the founder of Master Talk. Master Talk is a YouTube channel I started a few years ago to help people master the art of communication and public speaking. And I also have an executive coaching practice where I train a lot of entrepreneurs and CEOs on how to become great communicators in their industry.
Nice. Well, the first question I like to ask every guest is, how did you overcome the fear of public speaking? It's probably been forever ago for you, but how did you overcome that?
For me, Philip, I always like to say, I don't think I've overcome it, and I don't think I ever will. And the reason I say that is, sure, when I was growing up, the fear of communication was much higher in the sense that I was speaking my whole life in a language I didn't know. So I grew up in Montreal, Canada, which is a city near New York City up north. And in that city, for those who don't know, you need to know how to speak French. So my parents sent me to French school, but I didn't know the language, Philip. So my whole life, not only did I struggle with communication, I had to present in a language I didn't even know. And then to top it all off, you would think that when I got to university, I'll have studied in something even remotely related to my field. But no, I'm actually graduating accounting major from university. So literally everything that you would expect a great communication coach or professional to have, I don't have any of those credentials. And the point around fear that I always like to talk about is, let's say we were having lunch and Elon Musk calls me and he goes, hey, Brent, I like your YouTube stuff. Can you come coach me tomorrow? I'll pay you whatever you want. I'd probably shit my pants.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I've coached a lot of successful people, but there's always a level that we're fearful of to some extent. So the way that I would answer this, Philip, is, yeah, sure. Am I scared about most things? Probably not when it comes to communication. But I think as long as the message that we're trying to share matters more than the fear, outweighs the fear, we'll be able to overcome it. But I don't think it's a zero-sum game.
I love that. And you're so right about that. We get, I guess, in a comfort zone and we're comfortable with certain amounts of speaking. But then as we push ourselves to speak whether it's a bigger stage or in front of a bigger person or coaching, an Elon Musk, that can be super scary if we've never done it before. So yeah, you always have that fear. I love that answer. Now I want to ask this question. A lot of people, I think, get it confused. You got presentation skills, you got communication skills, you have public speaking skills, and these are all kind of get intertwined a little bit. Do you feel like they all do a little intertwined, but do you feel like there's different separate skills for each one of these areas?
Between public speaking and communication?
Yeah, and then I guess presentation skills with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. So here's the way I think about it, because you're right. A lot of these terms are kind of all over the place. So I'm happy to give my take on this. So let's start with the definition of communication and public speaking. For me, those are two of the same, in the sense that for me, the definition for both is the same one, which is the following: is to share an idea to achieve a specific outcome for a specific audience. So I'll repeat that again: to share an idea to achieve a specific outcome for a specific audience. What does that mean? That means a whole range of things, from going on a stage and speaking in front of 10,000 people and getting a bunch of sales or getting paid to do a speaking engagement, to convincing your wife that, or your husband or your niece, your nephew, that Chinese food is a better idea than Mexican food. So there's an idea being shared, there's a concept, and the goal is to achieve that specific outcome that we want for that specific audience, whether it's an audience of 10,000 or more often than not an audience of one. So that's the way I think about it. So in that sense, if somebody comes up to me and they're a terrible communicator, but their goal is to sell 5 hot dogs when communicating an idea on a stage, and they end up selling those 5 hot dogs, I have no feedback for them, because that was the goal. But if the goal is bigger, they want to sell 100 hot dogs, they end up selling 50, well, now we have a problem. Now we have a gap that we need to talk about, that we need to fill. The other piece to your question, Philip, around presentation skills, all these other terms, to keep things simple for me, I like to think of communication like juggling 18 balls at the same time. So one of those balls is presentations, one of those balls is ums and ahs, another ball is eye contact. But the struggle is if you try and juggle all 18 balls at the same time, all the balls will fall down. So instead, what I recommend is let's pick one of those balls up at a time. And generally speaking, I would say, and you probably have the same experience with your clients as well, Philip, where presentation skill is just the easiest thing to master because there's usually a big delta, there's a gap, and it's easier to repeat versus like trying to film a conversation with somebody else.
Yeah, totally. And it's definitely a lot more prepared thing than trying to have that conversation for sure. That's where I've noticed in Toastmasters with some very excellent speakers. It's not necessarily a presentation because they don't have like a PowerPoint or something like that. But whenever they have a prepared speech, man, they're almost flawless. No ums, no ahs. It's amazing. You're like, this is a great speaker, which they are. But when they get to the impromptu speaking part of the Toastmasters meeting, they're all over the place. Ums and ahs. You think they were brand new because it's something that's not prepared. So, and that's more of a conversation. It's something you have to think on the fly. It's definitely a unique skill to have. And that communication is very important. So I want to go back just a step. I know we talked about overcoming the fear of public speaking, and you gave a very excellent answer to that. But what about, how do you help people overcome that fear of public speaking? And I know there's those levels. Obviously, we never overcome it. And I agree with your definition there. We never overcome that. But how do you help people overcome that fear that they're at when it comes to public speaking?
Yeah, absolutely, Philip. So there's two parts to that. So the first part is understanding where it comes from, because I feel it's not well understood by people. And it's something I didn't really understand myself until a few years ago, to be honest. And then the other piece is figuring out how we can fix that. So let's start with the first part. Where does the fear of communication come from? A lot of us talk about caskets and dying and how death is like more equivalent to communication than anything else, which is crazy. But none of us really ask ourselves the question, where does this fear of it stem from? Why are we all scared of it? And the answer is really simple if you think about it. Where do we give most of our presentations? Where did we learn the habit of speaking? And the answer is school. Whether someone went to college or university, a lot of us learned presentations in school, elementary school, high school. That's where all of these habits are being taught. But here's the problem, Philip, and there's three problems in particular, is 100% of all of those presentations are, number one, mandatory. We don't wake up in the morning and say, hey, Philip, you want to get breakfast and present all day? You're the exception because you're a coach, but let's say you were somebody else, you were like an executive or something. Most people wouldn't sign up for that. Oh yeah, like Brenden, as if I'm gonna get breakfast and present all day. No one does it. Right.
Yeah.
That's problem number one. Problem number two is all of those presentations are different, Philip. We're not like trying to focus on one presentation, make it better. The kids were 8, 10, 12, 14 years old like we used to be. They got history presentations. They got math presentations. They got gym presentations. How in the world there's presentations in gym? How does it even make sense? Right? It just doesn't make any sense. And you don't get to pick the topic. So it's not like, hey, Philip, what are you passionate about? Do you like podcasts? Do you like public speaking? No, it's like, no, you got to talk about the Renaissance and Shakespeare. You're like, who am I shaking? What am I shaking? What is a milkshake? Like, some kids are confused. They don't get to pick the subject. And then problem number three, and this is the most important one, is all of those presentations are tied to a punishment. A punishment. So it's not, okay, totally fine, Brenda. I get that you're 12 years old, but if you don't do well at this presentation, instead of clapping and cheering you on, you're going to lose 30% of your grade. How does any of this make any sense? So, Philip, when we understand the core problem, which is this, if we see communication like a chore, do we want to work on it? And the answer, obviously, is no.
Man, those are such good points at it. I never really thought about it that deep and that perspective for sure. Yeah. Because I know when I want to do something, I definitely enjoy that more and want to do it more. And I'm willing to work 10 times harder. I mean, that's entrepreneurship in a nutshell right there, because we'll go work for ourselves for 80 hours a week versus somebody else for 40. And we'll complain about having to work 45 or 50 hours for them. But yeah, 80 to 100, 120 hours a week. No big deal. That's my thing. Like, I don't care. So that's so true that makes a lot of sense. That's where that fear stems from. So for those of you in the audience, think about that. Find a subject that you enjoy talking about and start trying to present on that continuously. Don't just do it here or there or just one time. Is yeah, it's that point as well that it's a one off here and there, and you're always doing a different presentation, so you never get to master that. So very
Absolutely.
true. Yeah. So I'm curious, speaking of master, with Master Talk, what made you decide to do that? I know you wanted to help people, but why start a YouTube channel? I mean, why go into Master Talk and start that YouTube channel?
Yeah, for sure, brother. So the origin story was when I was in university slash college. I used to do these things called case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So other guys
Hmm.
my age are playing like rugby or basketball or football or some other sport you probably wouldn't see me playing. I did the nerd version of that, which is presentations. That's what I did competitively.
Mm.
And that's how I learned how to speak. But then as I got older, Philip, I started coaching people younger than me, not really for money or anything. It was just kind of like when you're in a soccer team and there's younger kids who start entering the league. Well, you're just mentoring them, right, on their way up. So I was doing the same thing, but in Nerdland with competitions. So I was helping kids younger than me with their speaking because we didn't have a speech coach. And I wasn't
Mm.
one, by the way, back then. I was just helping them out because I was a great speaker, but I didn't know how to reverse engineer that to other people. So I started coaching them. And then 3 years went by and I'd coached like 60 to 70 people on how to communicate. And I was only 22, after this 3 years. I started when I was 19. So I developed an expertise that most people don't develop for another decade or two. And I
Mm.
did it in 3 years. But the other piece that I realized was everything in my head wasn't available for free on the internet. Because a lot of the advice that you have is like, oh, you should like be yourself, like follow your dreams. And I was like, well, this is nonsense.
Yeah.
So I started making videos with no expectation of anything. I had a great 6-figure job at IBM for a few years. I was really happy there. So I had no intention of leaving that corporate job initially. I was just making videos for fun. But one thing led to another, and as you know, the story has a different ending to it than I originally had anticipated.
Yeah. Man, that's pretty crazy, having a six-figure income, deciding just to start doing it. And I think a lot of us, and myself included, discount the whole helping people for free and realizing that that's how you help those people. But with the YouTube channel, with helping the people, what are some of those common questions that you get asked? And, can you share the answers with those questions as well?
That's a fascinating
Maybe
question.
like maybe like two, three tops. I'm sure you get tons of questions. But
Absolutely. So I would say the first one, going back to the early question you asked around. So what do we do to overcome the fear of communications? We talked about the first part, which is around where does it come from? But now the second part is what do you do about it? So the way that I think about fear and how I coach it is I think of it like a boxing match, Philip. So one side of the ring is the fear, the anxiety, the stress around communication. And the other side of the ring is the message. Why are we sharing this? Why is this important? Why are we actually getting into the ring in the first place? And the goal that I want to emphasize, Philip, is the goal is not for the fear to leave that boxing match, but rather make sure that when your fear and your message meet in the middle of that ring, that your message gets the knockout punch, that your message wins the match. So think about me. Like I started Mass Talk in my mother's basement, where I'm still coming to you live, by the way, at the ripe old age of 22. And I started coaching C-level executives. For those who are listening, C-level just means CEOs, senior people who had worked at the company longer than I was alive. Who in the world am I to coach these people on how to communicate ideas? And the way that I've seen it, Philip, did I have a lot of insecurity? Did I have a lot of fear? Absolutely. And I still do. But the reason I started the YouTube channel wasn't for my executive clients because they can just afford me. They could just buy my services or yours and just we'll be their coach. I created Master Talk initially for the 15-year-old girl who couldn't afford a communication coach because I was the only person they could relate to. I'm the only 22. I mean, I'm not 22 anymore, but
yeah.
early 20s guy who could create videos for these people. So it's either I did it or nobody else did. And I thought about the next Elon Musk, who's probably 17 years old, 14 years old right now. Nobody's supporting that kid. Nobody
Mm.
cares about them because they don't have their first exit yet. They're not successful yet. So I want to be that person for them. And that's what really sparked me to do it. So it wasn't about removing the fear. It was rather saying that, hey, this 15-year-old girl is more important than the fear that it comes with. So I'm just going to punch through the fear and get to the point, which is sharing the message. So that's the first question, and there's the answer to it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I love that. That's so good, and why I do all the free content as well, because I want people to be able to have that. And of course, it builds up that know, like, and trust, which I talk about a lot too, especially when it comes to video content. Because if people don't know, like, and trust you, they're never going to work with you, or very few will work with you. Some people may just be like, "I just need somebody so bad. Here's this random person. Okay, go." But for the most part, you're not going to get that person. And that's exactly what we talked about offline, with working with people, because you said you work with some people from IBM. You work with IBM, they're a client of yours and everything, as well as I'm working with some people at BMW. And it's the same thing, but it's because they know, like, and trust us. There's some kind of credibility there, which of course was tied back to our jobs, which helped a lot. But building that credibility, which is a part of building that content on YouTube.
Absolutely, brother. Like for me initially, for sure, YouTube gives me a ton of credibility today. But I would say when I started, that was never the point. I think for me, YouTube was just the medium I felt was the most appropriate for our industry. And the
Mm,
reason is because, if you want to hear somebody speak, podcast is a great way to do this as well. That's why I
mm.
like having these conversations. But seeing the person's facial expression, seeing their body movement, seeing the way that they're applying what they're teaching is the most effective thing. In YouTube, excuse me, your content lives forever. So that's why I opted for YouTube initially. And it's definitely paid off for me over time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely the second most searched engine besides Google itself. So for people looking for something, so that's a great place, and definitely where a lot of people go for education. I mean, they go for entertainment, they go for all sorts of stuff, but it seems like a lot of people, at least in my mind, they go for that education piece, which is a great thing. Is, hey, how do I get better at public speaking? How do I get better at communication? And hopefully our names were popping up. Like I said offline, I had done some research and ended up finding you, which was kind of cool. How we ended up meeting through a mutual friend on LinkedIn when you were on his podcast and everything, and we connected. So really cool. But what's another common question that you get when it comes to communication skills?
Yeah, brother. I would say the next one is what's the easiest thing that I can apply tomorrow? And this kind of plays
Mm,
into the, let's say, the last two questions is like, what are some easy tips that people can take home to the bank? So I'll give three. So the first one is the random word exercise. So all you have to do is pick a random word like phone, like screen, like iPhone, eyes, eyebrow, and create presentations out of thin air. That's it. So
mm,
5 times a day, 5 minutes a day, just do 5 words and just give 60-second random presentations out of thin air. And what this does is it seems kind of useless, but the truth is if you do this for a year, you'll have done the exercise over 1,800 times. So those small actions really accumulate. And going back to the outcome that I coach on, which is top 1% communicate in your industry, most people aren't willing to do it 1,800 times. But if you're
mm.
willing to do it that many times, you're definitely going to put yourself in a category of one and much more than just top 1%. So that's the first thing. The second thing, oh, and one other thing with random word, what I always like to tell people is if we can make sense out of nothing, or rather, if we can make sense out of nothing, we can make sense out of anything. And that's really the key.
So just real quick before you go on the second point. So for example, I use phones. I just say, I love my phone. It's great because I can get on social media and connect with people and kind of go on for a minute. That's what you're talking about.
Absolutely. And then as
Okay.
you get
Okay.
better, it'll turn to a personal story, right? Let's say I did that.
Okay.
Let's say I did phone for 10 seconds. It would be
Hmm.
like, when Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone in 2008, everyone used to think that a phone was just a way of talking to someone. But the truth is phones play a much bigger role, blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
And
Okay.
then you create a story around it, but not at the beginning. At the beginning, you just
Hmm.
do it. And then as you get better, you're able to build that momentum.
Also, yeah, that's a great tool right there.
Thanks, brother. And then the second one is the question drill. Have we ever been in a situation where we're in a boardroom, we're in a podcast, we're talking to a prospect on a sales call, and they ask us a question that we don't know the answer to? So the way to avoid that altogether is what I call bulletproofing your offer, bulletproofing your executive presence, where you get asked so many questions that you just have an answer for everything. So think about me. The reason I can speak well on podcasts is not because I'm brilliant. Okay. It's not because I'm unique or special.
Oh,
It
come
just,
on, man. You're brilliant.
thanks, brother. Hey, I'm just trying to catch up to you, man. For me, the reason I do well is because I've just been asked the same question 300 times. The first time somebody asked me where the fear of communication came from, I was like, I don't really know, man. But then over time, you figure out the answer. So how do we
Mm,
do this? Is it in an easy, digestible way? Book 5 minutes in your calendar every day and just guess what's one question that my audience is going to ask me about a high stakes presentation in my life. So if you're a coach or
mm,
a business owner, that could be a question about your offer. Okay, a prospect's going to ask you a question. Try and guess one that you think you're going to get. Like, oh, this is too expensive. Can I get a discount? Like, try every question every single day, and spend the other 4 minutes writing an answer to that question. Do that every day. 5 minutes. That's all I ask. You do that every day for a year, Philip. You'll have answered 365 questions about your business. Same thing if you're an executive. 365 questions about your career, about where you want to go next. You'll be invincible. And that's
mm.
the 5 minutes that will get you to that top 1%. That's number
Then
two.
you create an FAQ, put on your website.
There you go.
There you go.
I mean, literally, man, speaking into that, because I think you brought up such an important point there. People ask me all the time, like, Brenden, how do you come up with content? I was like, don't guess. Just ask Philip what he thinks. Just,
Mm,
hey, Philip, what
yep.
do you think's missing from my YouTube channel, man? You're an expert. You're great at what you do. And then Philip's just going to go through my stuff and go like, hey, Brenden, actually, you didn't cover this. And I was like, oh, that's actually a great point. So that's the key is don't
Yeah.
guess, people. Just ask smart people like Philip, ask people
Yeah.
around you.
Ask your audience, right?
There you go.
They're the ones that are going to want to know those things. So,
There you go. Like
uh,
somebody asked me a brilliant question, Philip. She was like, how do you present in a second language? And I was like, shit, I speak 3 languages. I should probably make a video on this. Nobody else has that on YouTube. Boom.
yeah, I couldn't do that.
That's okay. I'm sure there's a lot of there's a lot of things you can do that I can't, right? Like speaking to the automobile industry, you understand
Oh
that
yeah.
space a
Oh
lot
yeah.
more than I do, right? So we all have our things. So that's the key. Don't guess, just ask. And then the third piece is going back to video messages. Okay. A
Hmm.
lot of people don't send them. A lot of people are scared to post on social media. And I'm not going to be the person to tell you to do it. I get it. There's a lot of nerves that come with it. But what I will say is setting 30-second voice notes or video messages to the people you really appreciate in your life not only makes their day, but it also helps us understand why communication is not a chore, but rather an impact for change. So I encourage all of you who are listening to this podcast, for those of you who are brave enough, send a 30-second voice note, send a 30-second video message to Philip, to his Instagram, to his email, just appreciating him for the quality of the information he's sharing on the show. And that'll make his day. And not many people will do that. Let's say there's 500 people listening to this. Maybe 3 people will. And those are the
Hmm.
3 people that Philip will remember, right? But don't just do it in the context of that example. Do that in the context of a business, a customer you want to work with, clients that are already trusting you. Are we sending them video message? Are we showing them that appreciation? And that's the
Hmm.
20% that allows us to stand out 100% of the time.
Man, so many good points there. Oh man, yeah, I love that. And yeah, if anybody wants to send a video message, I would love that. That'd be amazing. And I want to go back real quick and point out something that I see a lot of people do, and just to kind of get your thoughts on this. Whenever you said C level and you say, like the executive level, like CEO, you gave an explanation of what C level meant rather than assuming people knew what it meant. Although I would say it's pretty good, safe assumption you can make. And there's definitely a lot of acronyms that are different industries use. For instance, there's STR in our industry. So we have Smart Transport Robot. And then we also have, I think it's something to do, it's on logistics side. I don't know it, but it has something to do with like our customers, the products that come in, like the parts and everything. But it's like, oh, STR. Well, it means two totally different things. So why when you spoke, you said C level and you said like CEO, like you explained that. Why was the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a fantastic observation from your end. It's no wonder you're a coach as well in the industry. But yeah, absolutely, man. I think for me, empathy is a really important trait of the best communicators in the planet, in the sense that going back to our definition, or the one that I used for the purpose of the show, which is share an idea for a specific outcome to achieve a specific outcome for a specific audience. Well, the best way to do that is to figure out what your audience wants, right? To figure out who they are, what they care about. So for me, one thing that's helped me a lot in my journey to empathy is I coach a lot of 5-year-olds and 7-year-olds. And the reason I do this is nothing to do with money. I actually only coach my clients as kids. It's a great value add for them. It's a great way to coach the family, and they're open to it. Actually, they wanted me to do it, not the other way
Huh.
around, right? But because they just want their kids to get a head start in life. like because a lot of them, right, and you'll see this as well
Yeah.
as you get more into the business. A lot of people, they wait too late to work on their communication skills. They wait 20 years into corporate, 10 years, because
Mm.
they don't want to make the same mistake with their kids. So the reason I'm telling you that, Philip, is it's really difficult to coach young kids because they don't know what a presentation is. So I remember this one time I was so bad, like 2 years ago. I was like, okay, guys, we're gonna do presentations, and then one of my girls, who's like 5 years old, one of my students, I don't have kids, but her, and she was like, yeah, what's a presentation? I was like, okay, well, when you introduce yourself, you start a present, like, what's an introduction? And so it was really challenging, Philip, for me to coach these
Uh,
kiddos. So I think the key is it really forced me to be super empathetic to an extreme level. So even when I'm speaking to you, I'm kind of assuming, part of my mind is assuming that I'm speaking to a 5-year-old. And I
mm.
don't mean that in a condescending way. I mean that in a way that if I could make my content as simple as a 5-year, which is the goal of my YouTube channel, then the whole world can master communication with zero, without you needing to use a dictionary, right?
Mm.
So that's the key. So whenever I'm using terms, I'm always catching myself and explaining things, because I'm always thinking, does the 5-year-old understand this? And there's no way a 5-year-old understands what sea level means.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And I know a lot of times they say speak with a fifth grader language, right? So you're going even further down. That's what I thought with a lot of the people at BMW, that there you can sit there and use these acronyms, and some of them I don't even know. And I'm like, hey, I don't know this acronym. And yes, I understand it says it there on your presentation, and that's perfectly fine if you want to put it there, because we're not supposed to read word for word. You try to help not have word vomit on your PowerPoint slide, but say the whole thing out. It doesn't take much longer. Instead of saying STR and going on, say smart transport robot and keep going, even though it said STR on the PowerPoint. Say it so you're not assuming that people know it. And I like that, going all the way down to fifth grade level, and yeah, or 5-year-old level rather. And that's got to be difficult for sure. Like, hey, let's do an intro. What's an intro? Yeah. I could imagine that. I could imagine that. But I think that ties in really well to this question I want to ask you is, how would the world change if you were an exceptional communicator? So could you answer that for us?
For sure. And I'm happy to give the principle as well. This is a question. The reason I created this, Philip, is I felt the biggest frustration I had with this industry, the one that we're in, is a lot
Mhm.
of communication is tied to negativity, to fear, to anxiety. Whereas, like, wait a second, we dream about our vacations. We dream about the expensive things we want to buy, maybe the BMW car we want to get, or something pricey. But we don't dream about our communication skills. We don't dream about a life. And if we
Mm.
were better at this skill, how would our life change? Because it would change dramatically, not just in the context of money and the bottom line and getting the next raise, but in the context of our families, the way that we communicate with each other, the way that we get to know each other. So that's a big part of communication too. So my answer to the question, how would the world change if I became an exceptional communicator? Because there's still lots more for me to go as well, and to keep learning and growing from you and a bunch of other people. So for me, the answer is super simple, and it's a speech that was given in 2014 by Taylor Swift when she won Woman of the Year by Billboard. So I'll go through it because you asked me the question. So Taylor gets up on stage, right? I was like watching a TikTok, and I felt it really encapsulated what I'm trying to do in life. And she stands up, she wins the award, and the last 30 seconds of her speech sounds something like this. Right now, in this moment, your future woman of the year is learning to play piano the first time, is in
Mm.
choir learning how to sing, and has big dreams to share their music with the world and her music with the world. And we need to take care of her. And she walks off stage. And then 7 years later, Billie Eilish wins Women of the Year by Billboard. She's like the youngest inductee in the history of the award. She's like 17 years old. She wins Women of the Year. So she gets up on stage. She has her big baggy clothes on. She's got her big shades, and she starts her speech by saying, "Oh my God," I'm gonna remove the cuss words here. She's like, "Oh my God, like every other person who's won this award is like super professional and super amazing, like Taylor Swift, and I'm here and I only got like a 2-minute speech." And then after that, she says something that will always stay with me for the rest of my life. And what she says is, what I was going to say, Taylor pretty much covered it, but I'll kind of paraphrase it. She said something along the lines of, your future woman of the year is like someone in a choir or something. And when I watched that speech, I was 11 years old,
Mm.
and I was just learning to play piano the first time, and I was just getting into choir. So the only thing I have to say, Billboard, is thank you for taking care of me. And she walks off stage. And the reason that always gives me goosebumps is I always think about, Philip, who's taking care of the 11-year-old Billie Eilish in communication coaching? Who is the person who's taking care of the next Elon Musk, who's 12 years old right now in Cambodia or someplace around the world, and nobody knows, sees, or hears them? And if I could be that person for humanity when I'm dead, which is probably going to be in 70 years or something, people can learn from me for the rest of, as long as we're alive. So I think that's my big mission in life, is how do you empower every genius that's ever going to live to be an exceptional communicator? Because if all of them did, then the human race as a whole would advance at light speeds. That's the full unfiltered version of my answer.
Oh man, I got so many chills from that. That is so true. And that's why I really resonate with that, because that's why I do this. That's why I want to get out of the 9 to 5, because I want to be able to show other people that, hey, you can do it. I mean, I'm an engineer at BMW, becoming a speaking coach. I mean, what in the world? Those have nothing to do with each other, but it's something that I want to do. And I believe that anybody can become the person they want to be. And so I try to live out that exact or very similar thing. And I love that. Taylor Swift almost said Britney Spears for some reason. She's getting crazy now. But anyways,
Well,
but
let me jump in
ahead.
with something, because I think it'll serve you. Is the one thing I would change in what you said, Philip, is you said something interesting. You said, because I'm an engineer, it has nothing to do with it. I would actually flip that. I would say that's what makes you the expert, because most engineers need you, right?
Mhm.
They need your expertise, they need your light, they need your message, but they'll work with you over
Yeah.
any other coach because you understand them
Mm.
more than anyone else. Like, I wasn't an engineer. Sure, I coach a lot of them myself, but
Mm.
I don't understand them as
Yeah.
much as you do. So I think you're the perfect guy for the job, actually.
Man, where did we still the line right here? Because this is something I also talk about. If I can just go back and forth on this, but that we all can do the same issues. I mean, look, we're both speaking coaches, and we both have different perspectives and have things we're talking about, and people are learning from us. And because of our backgrounds, because of who we are, because of our personalities, all these different things make it where you and I can have the same message, literally coach the same thing, and we're going to impact different people. And so you're right.
100%.
You're right about that. But whenever I talk with people, I'm like, yeah, going into speaking coaching or public speaking coaching, they're like, but you're an engineer. It's like it's just one paradigm to another and everything. So I say it that way, but I appreciate you bringing that out. And yeah, I guess giving me that, because you are exactly right. I'm in the spot that I'm in to be able to understand those people that also need that help. So
100%.
no, but hey, yeah, this has been awesome. I have one last question, which I feel like you kind of answered it here, but I'm still going to ask it anyways. If you could only share one message for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Surprisingly, it's not what you'd think, Philip. It's actually not the question.
Okay.
How would the world change if you're an exceptional communicator? The advice I would share is twofold. One, I would love to congratulate everyone to make it to the end of the podcast. A lot of people say they're committed, but very few people make it to the end. So for that, I say congrats. So for that small group of people who made it to the end, you're probably serious about your growth. So here's the real tip. The real advice is be insane or be the same. If you want to be like everyone else, that's totally fine. But if you want to be special, which you are because you made it to the end of the episode, you want to do something important with your life, the only thing that matters, Philip, is to understand the following. The people who do amazing things, who do wild things, who make a massive impact in the world are also wild people. They're crazy. They're absolutely off the nut. Don't you find it odd that I started a YouTube channel in my mother's basement at the age of 22, not on pranks, not on music, not even on BMW cars, but on communication and executive public speaking tips. And then I went to coach executives, made money doing this, yet I still live in my mother's basement. I don't really drive my car because I'm too scared to, even if I bought one. So my sister drives it for me. I'm in the 0.5, not the 5%. I'm in the 0.5% of top listeners on Spotify for Justin Bieber. And I love clubbing uncontrollably. And I do it at least once every quarter. How does any of this make any sense at all, Philip? And that, my friend, is the point. When every decision in your life makes sense to the only person that it should, which is you, you're probably making the right decisions. So be insane or be the same.
Man, That is so good. Now, I want to point out a couple things that happened throughout this podcast for those of you that are listening here at the end, and just shows why Brennan is such an excellent communicator. Throughout the whole podcast, he keeps bringing up my name. He keeps bringing up little analogies. He tells little stories. He relates things back to life. I mean, he's using his hands for hand gestures. There's a lot of little things that Brendan did throughout this whole podcast that a lot of people don't do, because he is that excellent communicator. So I encourage you to go back and watch the YouTube video, really, because this will be on YouTube. So you can actually see him doing this on video. But if not, listen again on the podcast, because you'll pick up on these things now that I've mentioned them, that he goes through and uses my name and makes little quirks here and there that kind of make you laugh, really keep you engaged throughout this whole talk. And it's not just about, I ask a question, he answers it. He'll throw in a little humor. So make sure you go back and listen to that, not just to listen just so I can get that listen, but listen so you can learn and pick up on that now, because there was so much value in what was spoken literally, but the things that were spoken with intentionality, which was my name, which is the little jokes, which was tying things in with stories and personal bits, those are also the value that you can learn to be able to communicate properly.
Absolutely, brother. Thanks for that. And I really appreciate it, bro.
Of course, man. That's why you're in that 0.5%, because you are an excellent communicator. But Brenden, man, I really appreciate you coming on. I appreciate the time. This was awesome getting to have this conversation with you.
Hey, pleasure was absolutely mine, brother.